Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so chapter 267 of Black Clover is out, and I gotta say, I really love how Asta reminded me just how funny he can be with his randomness by completely throwing out the tension in the beginning of the chapter. Literally, on page 2, panel 1 of the chapter, he throws out all the tension that had been built up by thinking AMD as soon as he meets him. And that's literally his initial reaction to meeting AMD in the flesh. And if you remember from last week's chapter, we ended the chapter off with the tension building up from the idea that maybe AMD had been taking over Asta's body and he was going to be facing off against Noct while Asta and AMD kind of like chatted in their inner world. Then we end up starting off this chapter with the leaks that we got on Wednesday or Thursday. And we saw that no, AMD actually was in the human world in the flesh in like a kind of demonic looking Asta form. And we saw from those leaks just him smacking Asta around left and right. So again, more tensions building up from this. And then we get the actual chapter release, and we see that not only is Asta not afraid of AMD, but he's thanking him for letting him use his powers this entire time. And what's funny about this is that the only reason why I am surprised by this at all is because we've had so many chapters lately where Asta's had serious moments. I mean, he's had funny moments here and there, but he's had so many chapters lately where he's had to be serious, like the fight with Dante, when he lost the fight to Dante, or not lost the fight to Dante, but with Zeno kidnapped Yami, and he basically was beating himself over the fact that he couldn't help his captain. Those chapters were so serious with Asta that it kind of made me forget that he actually is a kind of a comedic character. So it was actually kind of nice seeing the way Asta actually acts around AMD in the beginning of the chapter, and actually really throughout the entire chapter. I mean, the entire time he didn't seem like he was really that worried about AMD as a threat. In fact, literally while they're fighting, when AMD is basically threatening Asta, saying that he's going to basically take him out and take over his body, Asta's more worried about arguing with AMD over the fact that when the first time they met, AMD called him short, and now Asta's actually seeing him in the flesh and saying, well, you're not that much taller than me, you look like a kid too, and I'm going to be damned if a kid is going to call me short. Literally, his life is literally on the line in this moment, as far as he's aware, and he's more worried about arguing over what happened the first time they met, the first conversation they had, than trying to, defend himself against this fight. So there's this moment, right, where around, like, I want to say page 5 or 6, where AMD uses the right arm that he actually stole from Asta, and he summons Asta's grimoire with it, and then immediately takes out the Demon Slayer sword and starts whacking Asta around left and right with it. Now, what's interesting, and what I want to point out from this, is that when he's using the Demon Slayer sword, which by the way he actually doesn't actually physically touch, he only levitates it with his arm, kind of like he's using the Force, and just uses it to attack Asta throughout the chapter. But when he's fighting against Asta using the Demon Slayer sword, and even when he summoned the Grimoire, we've only seen him use that right arm during the chapter. We didn't see him actually using like his left arm to motion the Grimoire or to motion the Demon Slayer sword. We've only seen him use the right arm that is actually Asta's, that he has full control over because of their deal from when they were fighting against Dante. So I started thinking along the lines of, well, what if there's a reason why he's only using the right arm? What if he really can only use the right arm to have a connection to the Grimoire and summon it, and then use the Demon Slayer sword? And the reason why I bring this up is because of the fact that we've been led to believe this entire series that AMD is actually living inside the Grimoire, that he's connected to the Grimoire itself, which, if he was connected to the Grimoire, then he wouldn't need Asta's right arm to control the Grimoire and to summon the Demon Slayer sword and control it. He should be able to do that with either of his arms. And I mean, obviously there could be some kind of special rule or some kind of like special specification that we're not aware of just yet. Like, the one thing I'm thinking of is that maybe the AMD's body, even though he actually has a physical body in the human world right now because of the ritual that they're in, maybe his physical body, besides the right arm that he took from Asta, maybe that's more along the lines of, that like orb, that like mist ghost-like form that Zagret had before he actually gained his real body in the human world. Maybe something along the lines like that. And that's the reason why he actually can't use his other arm in order to actually control the Grimoire or control the Demon Slayer sword. Because I mean, like we saw with Zagret in that ghost-like form, even though he could do some things, he really didn't have any access to his real abilities. Like we didn't see him using any of his like word magic when he was in that form. Only after he actually gained his real form that he was able to actually do that. So maybe it's just kind of the same thing. Maybe he actually can't because his body is similar to that, even though we actually get to see it looking more demonic or actually look more complete. Maybe AMD's body actually is similar to that, where he just can't use any of his abilities outside of using that right arm. And you know what? That would actually kind of explain the look that AMD has in this chapter, because even though this actually does look like a pretty dope ass dark form that I assume Asta would have at some point in the series, probably not as sinister looking, but still, this is pretty much what I think Tabata is using as a prototype for a future dark form that Asta will have later on, possibly the form he'll use when he's fighting off against Lucifero. But this could explain as the reason why, because if you look at this chapter and you see AMD's look in the chapter, his right arm, which obviously is the arm he stole from Asta, looks completely different from the rest of the body. I mean, that arm on AMD in this chapter looked as out of place, to me at least, as it usually does for on Asta when he transforms into his dark form and only his right arm actually gets turned black. That's how it kind of looks in this chapter to me. So maybe the fact that his arm looks different, and this is actually an actual human arm that he actually has his demonic control over, maybe if AMD was actually able to get full control over Asta's body, he would look different than what we actually see him looking in this chapter. Because again, even though I'm sure this is actually a dark form we will see Asta with later on, I think it's safe to say that if Asta actually does get a form that looks similar to how AMD looks in this chapter, minus the right arm, then that means that this won't actually be his 100% full form. Like, basically, it won't be him using 100% of the power. But once him and AMD actually completely start to trust each other and actually form a complete bond, they will get their 100% dark form, which is basically just going to have a similar demonic look to the way we see AMD in this chapter, but the body will look more along the lines as Asta's right arm does. Now, what's really interesting about Asta in this chapter is that he is not fighting back really against AMD's attacks. I mean, AMD is throwing the attacks left and right at him, and he's just dodging them and taking them. And Nock pretty much clears out to him right in this chapter, says, listen, you gotta fight. Stop running, stop dodging, fight. Because this is how the ritual works. You either win or you die. And if you die, you end up not only losing your body to your demon, but you also turn into a grotesque looking monster. And if that happens, I'm going to kill you right on the spot. And then he goes off, and we actually we saw a little bit of this in the spoilers or the leaks for this chapter. But basically, he shows that the ritual room they're in is filled with the corpses of people who tried to actually use this ritual before and failed and got turned into kind of like monsters and had to be put down. And he, again, like I said, he states, you either fight and, force your devil to submit to you, or I will kill you. And again, keeping true to his character, Asta states throughout the entire chapter, whether it's Nock telling him to fight or AMD telling him to fight, that he is not going to fight. And the reason why he says that is because he could use his key sensing ability to tell that AMD, despite the airs that he's putting on, doesn't actually want to hurt Asta. And you know that once Asta says that he can sense something through ki, it's 100% a fact. I mean, it's kind of like how Luffy is over in One Piece. Once he says that a character's like strong or that a character's trustworthy, if he's the one saying that, then you know it's a fact because of the fact that he has the ability to like innately sense someone's strength and sense whether or not someone's good of heart or they're an evil person. He has the ability to basically just pick that out of you right away. And ever since Yami started training Asta how to sense ki, and I would argue maybe even a little bit before that, Asta's had the same kind of innate ability where he can basically sense whether or not a person is good and if he is a threat to them. And we've seen Asta do this plenty of times throughout the series. I mean, if you even just think back to the reincarnation arc, he was the first one to accept Sally, Rades, and Vato back into the group and to have them help out and join up with their team in fighting off the elves, because using his ki, he could sense that they actually not only were obviously they weren't actually turning good, but he could tell that they weren't there as a threat to them, and they genuinely wanted to help out, even though it was to seek revenge, at least on Rades' part. They wanted to help out in stopping the elves' plans. So he was like, alright, they can be trusted. They can help us in this fight. And if you think back to it, really, this isn't the first time we've seen Asta actually use his ki sensing ability on AMD. Because if you think back to the first time the two of them actually met, back during the Witch Force arc, Asta most likely, when he first met him in that like inner world that the two of them first talked to each other in, Asta most likely used his ability to sense AMD's ki at that moment. Because I mean, if you think back to chapter 97 when the two of them first met, Asta was not afraid of AMD at all. When the two of them first met, AMD right off the back said, give me your body. Almost, it seemed like in the beginning he was almost trying to convince Asta. Like he was trying to talk Asta into handing over his body. And then when that didn't work, then he started to attack him. And honestly, the attacks didn't work, and Asta and him kind of fought, but we didn't really get to see the conclusion to that fight, or even really Asta throw any punches at him. We just saw him jump on AMD's giant arm after AMD missed an attack on him. And again, during that initial meeting, despite the fact that this is the first time Asta came into any contact with any type of demonic form, he was not afraid of him. And I think it's because of the fact that Asta could sense his ki and knew that he actually wasn't trying to hurt him. And at the end of the chapter, we end up getting an idea as to why AMD probably doesn't want to actually take over Asta's body. Because during their fights, after Nock pretty much lays down the law, alright, you either fight or you get turned into this monster after he takes over your body and I kill you. And after Asta declares again that he doesn't want to fight AMD because he doesn't think he's actually a bad guy, we see AMD reacting to this, and he kind of sees this image of a woman standing next to Asta. And then on the final page, we actually get to see what the woman looks like. And she is literally the spitting image of Asta. And we already know, just off the look that she has, that she's more than likely Asta's mom. Which means that now we know that AMD has some kind of connection to Asta's mom in the past, and was more than likely there when she ended up dying. Because we already know through the flashback we had back on chapter, I want to say it was 246. Oh, I think it was chapter 246 when we had this flashback where no, it was before that. It had to be before that. I think whatever chapter it was, when Asta was fighting off against Dante, we saw AMD have a very visceral, angry reaction to seeing Lucifero and Dante. He was saying over and over again, kill him, kill him, kill him. We saw that AMD, not Asta, AMD had a flashback to who we now know, because of the fact that they're wearing the same clothes, is Asta's mom, as she was more than likely dying. And the only thing we saw from the flashback, or the only dialogue we got from it, was her saying, my dear son. Now, if I had to guess, I'm going to think that because of the fact that we could see at the end of the chapter that obviously AMD and Asta's mom had some kind of friendly relationship in the past, that flashback that AMD saw was her saying, protect my dear son, or something along those lines. And we actually might have got a hint to this flashback earlier on in the series, way earlier on. If you think back to chapter 97, after the Witch Queen actually forces Asta to activate his dark form and realizes that he actually managed to keep control over his body, she has this line of dialogue that I think actually does hint to what might happen when we get the full flashback. So she says, and I have it right here because I want to get the quote right, I assumed you were one of their kin, but I was wrong. You're simply defective. A sudden mutation kept mana from dwelling in you. And it's that line, a sudden mutation, that's the line I think we want to focus on for the flashback that we're eventually going to get. Because what I think happened is that somehow, some way, Asta's mom came into contact with the Dark Triad, I'm going to assume, prior to them taking over the Space Kingdom completely. Because we know that immediately after they took over the Space Kingdom, Yuno was taken out of there and basically brought over to Hage Village. Now, because of the fact that Asta and Yuno were found at the same time, they were in the same basket, they were wearing similar clothes, we know that they're both from Space Kingdom, and we know that they came over around the same time. Which means that in order for Yuno and Asta to have gone to the Hage Village at the same time, Asta's mom had to have died prior to Yuno's parents being killed. So basically what I think happened was that Lucifero and Dante ran into Asta's mom, who actually was tied to AMD already, probably already had some kind of contract to him. And basically, when they killed her, she pleaded with AMD to basically protect Asta, her son, because she thought that he was in some kind of danger, or maybe she just wanted AMD to basically to look out for him because she wouldn't be there. And in that moment, while she was dying, she formed a contract, or some kind of contract with AMD and Asta, and that's what the mutation was. That the reason why Asta's body was never able to develop any kind of mana was because of the fact that AMD was residing inside of him this entire time. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for the chapter. I cannot wait to end up finding out exactly what the history between AMD and Asta's mom is. I kind of speculated in my, kind of review of the leaks for this chapter that maybe AMD actually might have been Asta's dad. I'm leaning a little bit more away from that due to the actual translation for the chapter, but I'm going to wait to talk about that again until the official translation comes out and we have the exact details as to what's going on. But again, I don't think we're actually going to be looking into the actual backstory between AMD and Asta's mom in the next chapter. I'm pretty sure we're going to skip over that for now and kind of put it on the back burner until we actually get the fight between AMD, Asta, and Luciferal. So I'm looking forward to that. But regardless of what ends up happening in next week's chapter, I am excited. I hope you guys are too. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys thought about the chapter, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.